All right, welcome back to Problem Solver Politics live stream, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Cardin Ellis, with Cody the Oracle.
Hey, everybody.
And we are joined in studio via California-based Zoom. You'll notice all the California politicians are calling it California-based Zoom now, which is really funny. We got Dan Larson from Montana.
It's like an iPhone's like designed or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So we got Dan Larson from Montana coming to talk to us about his campaign here. Dan, say hi.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Hey, what's up? Okay, so we just got to make sure that everything is working. You know what I'm saying? We've had a couple of problems with these interviews. We're really happy to get this one kicked off. So anyway, Dan is going to be a huge part of his platform, besides just being tall, dark, and handsome, is actually universal basic income. And we just had our interview last week with Heidi Briones, who's up in Oregon's 1st district, and talked with her about some of the interesting isms of being a UBI candidate. Now we're going to talk to Dan about him and his platform and so on and so forth. So, Dan, first off, I don't know if you saw our interview with Heidi Briones, but I know that you guys have talked in some forums before. You're basically just a Republican version of her, kind of, I guess you would say, right?
Oh no, we're different. We're different, but there is an overall theme. The UBI Caucus candidates are anti-establishment candidates. We're trying to run and unseat some of the more established voices in the political spectrum. So you also have Blair in Oregon, who's unseating a pretty establishment Democrat as well.
All right, so you guys are the cool new rebels in the block, right? Can we start getting
we're
like
the
a jacket?
AOCs of like 2020.
You're like the AOCs of 2020. Yeah, can we get like a cool jacket? You know, like the greasers had in Greece. You know what I'm saying? Or no, what was that club of people that had like the pink ladies jacket or something?
For reference, Cardin was a what do you call it? What do you dance? What'd you call it? Show choir. Well, could you come with references? I'm like, yeah, a Grease jacket. Like, what are you talking about? But
no, Grease. Come on, that's Americana.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's we don't have jackets designed yet, but we could throw it in right now.
I just mean you make connections I wouldn't think of. I was like, I wouldn't think about.
We'd have to make it classy. Well, here's one for you because you're the sports fanatic. It's just like the jacket you get when you win the Masters Cup, right? Isn't it a jacket when you win the Masters Cup?
You get a green jacket, yeah.
Because we can't be wearing a greaser jacket that'd be against the dress code up on Capitol Hill.
Hey, if all the UBI Caucus people had green blazers, that'd be a little aside before we get into more serious stuff. I actually do like the idea of various candidates that like support a single cause, whatever it would be, kind of wearing uniforms and that. I don't know. I think totally off topic. I just while we went down that.
I've been bringing up this idea of giving everybody a NASCAR uniform in Congress. You know, where they have to wear their sponsorships on it. So maybe we could just have the people on our sponsorships. That'd be good.
Like a Lakers jersey, the little wish logo on it.
Okay, so here's a question that I have.
Sure.
Because you and I are kind of operating in similar circles here. I served in the local 38th District Central Committee for the GOP here in Los Angeles. You're running as a Republican in Montana. I actually had a lot of success talking to people about UBI. But I do recognize that in the current nomenclature and in the current vernacular, free money is generally associated with Democrats. People just assume like, oh, well, if somebody's trying to give away something for free and promising something for free, it's some socialist Bernie Sanders thing, you know? And you oftentimes do get dismissed by Republicans and people in, fellow red districts who are more closed-minded, I do admit, that you get brushed aside as, this is some socialist thing because they hear the word free money or unconditional basic income. And it just sounds like a Bernie Sanders plan on steroids. So I get how somebody like Heidi Briones could be considered a more progressive person because at the end of the day, like the most progressive you can get is giving away everything necessary for free. You know what I'm saying? So I could get why like maybe a common person that's not completely in the political know could see universal basic income as a very progressive thing. I'm really curious, what is it like for you as a Republican running on this idea that though it was invented by Republicans basically and first championed by Republicans, and the only states that have done anything even close to it were Republican, and the past two presidents that have actually written out checks kind of like it were Republican. What's it like running as a Republican on this thing that many, if not most, perceive as extremely leftist? How do you bridge that gap? What do you do?
Yeah, so I don't think people see it as extremely leftist. I think some of the Bernie platform is seen as way more left than this one.
Interesting. Okay.
So it was actually brought to me by a bunch of Trump supporters that worked for me in a hardware store. They were talking about the Democratic debates back in July.
So are you the next Joe the plumber? It's like Dan, the hardware store guy?
Yeah, hardware store manager and everything. So
okay, sweet.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah. So they brought it up. They were making fun of the Democratic candidates, and then they said, well, there is one guy, this Andrew Yang guy, he wants to give everybody money. And I thought they were joking. I went home and I did my homework, and I realized that they weren't joking, that it does appeal to them, this concept of universal basic income. And I think that is some of the universality of it. And then when you talk about it in like the way that Milton Friedman used to talk about it, where it's like getting over the welfare state, we see a lot of people that are on something like disability and stuff like that. And that really, it really makes people angry. It's like, here's these welfare programs that are essentially fostering a dependency on the government, and there's no benefit for the general population. You're just paying taxes into the system, and other people are gaming it. So it is one of those things that if you get enough space in the conversation, you're able to get people to go on board with. But I've got other things that I'm doing as well, and people are pretty tired of a lot of things.
Okay, cool. So I gotta, sorry to interrupt you, but what I don't know how I would start a campaign as a UBI candidate. It almost seems like UBI would have to be another thing as part of a package. Is UBI the best conversation starter that you have, or what's it like being a UBI candidate in a place like Montana?
Yeah, so I didn't see myself as a UBI candidate specifically. UBI is one of the platforms that I think is going to be the most successful, but people are grabbing onto my campaign just based off of the negatives that are happening in the Republican Party. So there's a lot of far right messaging that's going out there, and I think people are kind of tired of it, and they're tired of corporate politics. So the guy I'm running against is like the 12th richest U.S. senator. So it's nice to have that hardware store manager who wants to be, a public servant versus the traditional corporate politics that we've got.
Yeah. So how do you bridge that money gap between you two? Because if Bloomberg taught us anything, you can win the U.S. Virgin Islands. You know what I'm saying? Or
it just came out, by the way. It ended up being a little over $1 billion total he spent.
Yeah. So how do you bridge that money gap? Because as much as Bloomberg did teach us, as Andrew Yang said, money can't buy everything. And at the end of the day, his candidacy kind of was a joke. He pushed the needle in a lot of directions and changed the game in 8 to 12 states in a way that was very unpredictable. Okay. And you can't look at politics today and not see the direct correlation between money raised and success in the election booth. Okay. So, we've got a hardware store manager with this awesome idea of UBI. How do you beat the 20,000 Facebook ads that this 12th richest, senator can beat tomorrow, and just all the mailers and the lemmings of people that just look at them and then just go vote according to how the mailer told them to vote. And then hopefully Montana, with only 1 million people, has a Republican Party that's smart enough and established it's smart enough to be, actually, you're not a ballot harvesting state. Sorry. In California, we're a ballot harvesting state, but you're not a ballot harvesting state. But, hopefully they're smart enough to have a decent ground game. How do you go up against that machine as a hardware store manager when the 12th richest senator is your opposition? That's like David and Goliath right there on steroids.
Yeah, and the hardest part about that one is people are already assuming that I can't get it done. But I see it a little bit differently. I think money can't buy you inspiration, and so there was people the day after I announced that came into the hardware store thanking me, giving me money directly. There's a lot of people disenfranchised with the existing system. So I think that people don't realize it, but a Bernie supporter and a Trump supporter are pretty similar people.
Yeah.
You know, they're both, they grabbed onto that, like, here's somebody that doesn't represent the normal establishment, you know? So I think that there is a political will or a political force that's gaining power. And it's one of those things. I talk to a lot of people where it's like, you know, the GOP technically is really strong in Montana, you know, and Trump won by 20 points in the last election. But those 20 points don't go to people that don't have original thoughts in their own head or represent, you know, a different part of the establishment. Trump came out here 4 times to do rallies in the last U.S. Senate race to try to unseat our Democrat senator.
Okay.
So a president coming out to your state, I mean, to Montana, is pretty much unheard of, you know, and especially 4 times in an election cycle. You know, it should have correlated to a win for his establishment pick, but it didn't. You know, he couldn't hold it up. They spent a ton of money in the race, and they were
with Trump's help.
Unseat him.
With Trump's
direct help. So I think that there's
was this guy? How badly did he suck?
Well, he wasn't from the state, which is kind of
carpetbaggers never win.
Yeah, so he was from like I think Maryland or something like that.
What?
So they harped on him pretty hard for that.
Sounds like a movie, like a bad City Slickers 7 remake, you know, premise or something like that. The rich guy from Baltimore ends up in, you know, like inheriting a house from a great uncle in Montana. You know what I'm saying? And the clause of his inheritance is that he has to win local, you know, elected office. It sounds like a bad movie from the 80s, man. Okay, but even with Trump's help, he couldn't pull it off, huh?
Right. So there's this narrative that we don't discuss in the U.S., and I think it's because the political establishment doesn't want to talk about it. But Trumpism doesn't apply to all of the GOP. You know, the people just, when they saw the chances of, when they saw the establishment pick in Hillary Clinton, they were pissed off, right? Okay. And so they voted for Trump in huge numbers, and they went to the polls because they're tired of politics as usual. So I think people recognize that our system's been purchased, and we have, like, cattle ranchers, for example, they have huge problems with the meatpacking industry because there's huge consolidations of companies like JBS that are just, I mean, these guys really are getting shafted all the time, and their politicians really aren't saying anything because they would be essentially cutting the checks off to their campaigns. So it's one of those things. Regular people are being affected by all kinds of corporate politics, and this is energy, banking, cattle ranching. You know, there's no shortage of industries to talk about. When you look at the FEC filings of these candidates, there's no way they have honest voices, and I think people recognize that. Okay,
well, now you said there's a force you're tapping into. What do you think that force is?
I think it's the anti-establishment vote. The people that are just real tired of the way politics are going. I think the approval rating in Congress is 18%. You know, so nobody's sitting there saying the way we're doing it's working. You know.
Well, I mean, but it's kind of been that way a while. We've always had this crappy. I mean, in my entire life, I can't think of a time where it was in the 20s. I've seen it sink as low as 13%. Okay, but there's this strange dichotomy. We always talk about how Congress has an approval rating, sometimes 18%, you know, sometimes 16%, and that's abysmally pathetic, okay? But there's also other studies that are done, there's other questions asked in these same surveys, in these same studies, and there's this interesting phenomena. It's called the My Congressman phenomena, where most people hate Congress as a whole, but they think their congressman is doing a good job fighting the system for them, right? Like the average person, when asked, like, what's the approval rating of your congressman? Oh, it's in like the 60s or the 70s, you know? So as a whole, we know Congress sucks, but we think our guy's the good guy. You know, he's the good apple in a barrel full of apples, right? So I don't think that just by mentioning the necessarily approval, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying I don't think necessarily the disapproval of Congress is the measurable quantifier that says this time there's going to be a better anti-establishment voice. I'm just wondering what your feel is on the ground. You mentioned that you say that you think there's like an anti-Trump vein you're tapping into the Republican Party, or an anti-establishment vein. Like what Like, how is it different than previous, just like anti-establishment sentiments that we've had before that could carry you into office? Does that make sense? Like,
it does. You sound like my campaign manager. He's kind of a realist, and he keeps giving me all of this the same level of feedback. And I said, no, once people catch on, once they understand, it'll be different. And I don't think I'm selling it just as I'm anti-establishment. I'm selling it that I'm actually listening to people. And like my competitor, Steve Daines, he didn't do a town hall in the state for like 2 years. It's one of those things where they're not saying that this person is representing them well. This person, he lives in the state in a very affluent community. And then he doesn't really travel back and forth, and he's not really interested in listening to the people. And I've talked to several people, and I'm one of them, that we've all written him letters, and he gives you a standard form letter, and it insults your intelligence, and I understand that they can't handwrite letters directly to you, but they could at least pay attention to what you said and give you something that directly corresponds.
They could at least have an intern like change one sentence on the form letter and have a handwritten signature or something. Like they're we all get that you need a form letter, bro, but at least let us know that this was ingested, so I don't think I wasted my time. Is basically what you're saying. I mean, candidates all the time and civil servants all the time are saying, we want a community that's involved. Okay, well then respond when I get involved. You know what I'm saying? And if you don't, then it makes me think that you're full of crap. And I want you replaced with the next guy that's full of crap. No, I'm sounding way too cynical. I'm sounding like Cody now. All of a sudden. You know what I'm saying? By the way, Cody, I don't want to be commandeering this interview. You got anything you want to ask him? I've asked like 10 questions here.
Well, no, I was just saying it was interesting. But there is one thing, and I'm going to be interesting asking this to a lot of people, but I'm just wondering, especially out in Montana, it's interesting to me as well, with, of course, the current events being what they are. I mean, generally speaking, I'm sure you'll be looking forward coming up in the next few months, a lot of spring events to go campaign at. So what has it been like just trying to figure out how to kind of manage a campaign from home almost? Because it's weird, man. Or I guess even more so, I'm coming from California where I just assume everyone's living like this. Is Montana a lot more open right now, one? And then two, has there been any other kind of weird road bumps to running a campaign during the current events, so to speak?
Yeah, I haven't done it in any other format than COVID-19. I think I entered the race in end of February. So we got locked down shortly thereafter. So this, I think this environment actually is more beneficial to candidates like me, that are trying to put down a large bed of content. We're more approachable. We can demonstrate that to the voters. It's just getting voters to pay attention to what we're doing. That's the more difficult thing. So thank you for having me on your show. That's
big time. Yeah,
more important thing.
I like to speak to.
But I have been doing some creative stuff. Like I did a follow-up interview with the cattle ranchers in Roberts County. There was like a 1-hour ABC segment on the highest Trump voting district in the U.S. And so I reached out to the one of the cattle ranchers profiled, and we had a cattle conversation because our cattles are at a rock bottom price, and there's a lot of things to talk about. So things like that, getting creative. If it catches fire, I think it'll be right.
Okay, so what are you doing that's getting creative? Because I'm loving this.
I love that, especially because I was going to ask too, and that kind of answered my question. I was wondering because it's something online, but then too you have to kind of pull it to the local. I love that. It's a great way to pull it local. I hadn't thought of that. I guess I come from California, but yeah, get on a cattle rancher Twitter. I guess that's a great way. Definitely make some progress out there in Montana.
Dude, that's so awesome. Is it true that there's more cows than people in Montana?
Yeah, there's 2.5 times more cows than people in Montana.
That is awesome. That is so great.
So how do you advertise on cows from the internet?
I was about going to say, can you just screw billboards? We're going to start painting cows with "Stop Dan Larson for U.S. Congress."
Oh, actually, it fits. That's a great idea.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
I just need to build some templates. Yeah.
Yeah, we can
don't get shot, right? If you're running up on someone's property, spray painting their cows, just don't get caught. I guess don't let them see you.
Yeah. So
I'll get the cattle ranchers to spray their own cows. That'll be a good idea. Right.
I guess that would be the much more responsible and smart way of doing it, especially if your name's on it. So I agree. Yeah. My idea is not good. Don't do that.
So are you kind of in with the ranchers then? Like what is your path to victory here? I mean, I know that's a cliche that everybody says, but what is it? Like where do you think you can really get in there? Like, it's like Mike Tyson in that last fight he had with the big Jamaican guy. His arms were shorter, but he had that uppercut. You know what I'm saying? And the other dude, he was taller and he had the length. So like, What's the strategy, man?
So the strategy kind of looks like this. So I am in an open primary. So I am talking to people that are even disaffected, like Bernie voters, things like that. People that are really upset with the existing GOP politics that are willing to say, hey, I'll help out and improve the conversation overall. So because if you look all the way down the ballot in the governor's race, our congressional race, this Senate race, and then even through the state legislature, I think that the open primary is a good idea for to try to essentially create a more bipartisan candidate, like a purple level candidate. And so there's a lot of voices that want to go there. And I think I can win the Trump supporters over because they see in Trump something of the anti-establishment. And I think I represent that more than my competitor. So.
Okay, cool. So you keep saying, I think I can win the Trump supporters over. Is there like a division between, non-Trump supporters and supporters that's marked in Montana that like, is that like a big thing up there or what?
As far as what the Trump supporters, who they are.
Yeah, or is there like different strains of Republican? Because out here, pretty much, there's so few Republicans that we all just kind of like who cares? We're just glad you're Republican. You know what I'm saying? Is there just like enough up there that it's like, oh yeah, I'm a pro-Trump Republican or an anti-Trump Republican or what?
Well, so the type of voter that I'm talking about is this activated voter, the one that didn't used to get involved.
Oh, okay.
The new voter. The new Republican primary voter, and that would be
so somebody that's just getting involved in the process, similar to how Andrew Yang brought a bunch of young people in that were starting to get registered in the Democrat Party in order just to vote for him. You're talking about people that probably never voted before, but now all of a sudden they're getting active because they like your platform and what you're suggesting.
Or a growing number of people that just agree that we should throw them all out. And when they say them all out, it's pretty much everybody in Congress.
Now, I can get on board with that. I can get on board with that. So now we love UBI. Here. In fact, what birthed this channel is, and I'm sorry, this interview is going to be very UBI centric just because we definitely talk about a lot more. Yeah. How do you pitch UBI to a Montana person? Like what's the big, hey, this could help you out in X, Y, or Z? I'm sure there's probably some similarities with people in other states, but there also has to be some things that are unique to Montana that would be interesting. Like what's the pitch to your average Montana person? Because like, for example, I've never been a cattle rancher. I know very little about cattle ranching, and I don't see in my mind like exactly how that could help me as a cattle rancher. And anything that I envisioned it helping me with probably is going to sound very ignorant and city slicker. Like, I don't know, more grain for my cows. Or like I'll probably say something that'll be like, some sound bite that they clip saying, look at this jerk from the city. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't know anything about cattle ranching. But what is the pitch to Montana people like to make you better? Like make you their choice, especially when it has to do with UBI.
If you want to talk about it in the framework of UBI, so like Montana is a very resource centric, so natural resource centered economy, and this has been very punishing to our communities for a very long time. So in Montana and in other rural areas, I really saw it once Andrew Yang kind of got through these places, he would catch fire because in a rural community, what you do is you export your children, and in a place that's nice enough like Montana, you import retirees, right? And the retirees have more money than the existing population, so they can price you out of homes and all kinds of other stuff. So the big sell of UBI is the pro small business environment that it creates on Main Street. So I live in a town of 2,000, and that would be like $2 million directly on this Main Street, which would be transformative to all these small businesses. And we have a higher rate of entrepreneurship than the rest of the country. It's like 219 per thousand. And a lot of it is small time entrepreneurship, but it's like we're all doing whatever we can to survive. And we understand that we all could use some sort of uniformly distributed economic resources. So,
I never really thought of it that way.
Small business is a big sell on this one.
Yeah, I never really thought of it that way, but you guys are kind of like the banana republic of the United States of America. I mean, very natural resource rich. You export a lot of goods, such as cattle. You know what I'm saying? We all need it. I remember there was a stat that said like every 22 seconds, a cow was slaughtered for McDonald's. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's literally just how much beef just that one organization generates in America. Okay. So you're going to be exporting a lot of kids that go off into a college and say, okay, I want to go to city. I want to get an education. I want to work for an income instead of doing this rural thing. Maybe, you know, continuing the ranch like my brothers and sisters want to isn't for me. So yeah, you're going to be exporting a lot of citizens, and you're going to have a lot of people going to the more urban environments. But yeah, just as I was talking to you in the pre-show, I know like 7 wealthy Hollywood people that have houses in Montana, and they're Montana residents. Like, even though Kanye West is touring all over the world, and we all know he's an LA guy or a New York guy, somehow he's only taxed, you know, at the 1% that Montana requires. Oh, and his Maserati was only a $50 registration fee instead of like the $1,500 registration fee that it would be at the DMV in Los Angeles. So there's all of these wealthy people that go to Montana once they've accumulated their wealth, or like you said, they're retiring. And yeah, that would be frustrating, because all of a sudden, if you live in a community of 5,000 people and 500 new homes get built that all of a sudden are worth $1 million, worth $500,000, when the average home value is maybe only $150,000 to $200,000, even if your home goes up $100,000 in value, that all of a sudden puts a new property tax burden on you. And also makes it so that even if you do move out, you can't really buy a new house because all the homes are expensive now. And for no good reason other than you have a bunch of wealthy people trying to escape taxes in the places that they already ruined. You know what I'm saying? So I could see how UBI would be attractive to somebody like that, because you kind of are facing the problems that a nutrient and natural resource rich, kind of like Banana Republic would, you know, in like Belize. Belize gets frustrated when all these expats, you know what I'm saying, are coming down there and pricing out local communities, because all of a sudden you got retirees from America that want to live down there. So I could see that. What else? Like, is there anything that works specifically in conjunction with UBI that you've seen be successful as well in Montana?
So anything so the value added tax is
so you're punching that. You're doing the double punch. You're doing the not just UBI. But
so it's a lot to sell the Republicans, because I mean, I think Ted Cruz was already proposing it, you know, a couple of years ago. So if you could say, hey, would you like income tax burden to go away? Would you like some of these payroll tax burdens to go away? The value added tax is kind of this amazing thing to do at the same time. And I think if you did UBI at the same time, you could get support on both the left and the right, and actually make it something that benefits everybody. And then you can start shrinking the government. So that's been a pretty good conversation with voters in Montana.
Okay. Have you had success actually doing kind of a bipartisan campaign? I mean, if you got an open primary, you really, and you feel like you have a good message that's bipartisan, and you're able to go get those Bernie Sanders voters that you say are a lot like Trump supporters, and, you know, people that are just frustrated with the establishment, though they may have previously voted for establishment people. Do you find yourself like in a position where maybe catering to Democrats would help? Usually strategically that's suicide. You know what I'm saying? Because you need to play party politics.
Well, I've done a couple of interviews with other with Democrats running on the UBI platform. And so usually what we'll have is like a large, you know, a conversation just about our state. And then we're able to negotiate these different things because we're centered around UBI. So I think what you can do is you could have, for example, like Jonathan Herzog, right? If I work with him, then I am, for my voters, I'm taking out Jerry Nadler, right? Okay. And then when I talk to him, we can agree on UBI, and he'll have some different ideas on different things. But I can also say, hey, can I get your support for going after the meatpacking industry? And he says, hell yeah, you know. And so it's one of those things that's pretty good in that conversation.
Okay, cool. So how is, because this is really interesting, the whole rise of the UBI phenomenon, because it's completely monetarily based, and the demise of America has been a bipartisan affair, generally centered around money and how money has corrupted American politics, especially over the past 25 to 30 years. Okay. Though there's always been corruption, it's been a soft corruption that's existed in politics, whereas now we're getting the much harder corruption, more entrenched. Okay. There is a spectrum. Some people say, oh, well, it's always been that way. No. No.
Not like this.
Yeah, not like this. It's been really bad the past 20 years. So if you think that you must fight fire with fire, if it's money that has corrupted politics, it's the way we operate our money that will uncorrupt it, kind of, for lack of a better term. So I could see I could see UBI really having like this cleansing effect upon Washington and really upon our society. And that's why I really like UBI. As Elon Musk says, once the money question is out of the way, I think we can then start focusing on actually the deeper, more important spiritual questions about who we are as people, as citizens, as a nation, as children of God from a moral perspective, as, citizens of this nation from a civic perspective, and family members from a familial perspective. So I could see it as being this wildly bipartisan thing. However, there is a difference between Democrat UBI supporters and Republican UBI supporters, if not just in name, but what do you think sets you apart from your Democrat UBI supporter counterparts? Because in what we've interviewed, it definitely seems that this tilts heavily Democrat, though it was originally championed by Republicans, ironically. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like Democrats are out there a lot more saying, hey, we want to do it. And it seems that it's getting some sway over there. So like, how do you not mitigate that? Because I wouldn't necessarily say it as a problem, but it's a phenomenon. It's a truth that exists. So like, how is Republican UBI different than Democrat UBI? Like, why can't you run as an independent,
I guess the furthest away I've been on this conversation with another UBI candidate was probably Russ Cirincione, I think, in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So when him and I talked, so he's more on that Bernie spectrum, that whole platform. So he's a lawyer. This guy could win. But so the difference is I see it as a way to shrink the government over time, so really shrink like some of these ineffective spending programs, the welfare state. I believe that the federal government should actually be small.
Yeah.
And he would see it as a way to stack onto existing programs, and I would see it as a way to eliminate the dependency on existing programs. And I think that's a substantive difference.
Well, also to me, your point of view, I share that point of view, and I believe that's actually just what's backed up by science. It's been proven that when people have jobs, they generally disqualify themselves and no longer renew their dependence upon welfare programs. I mean, one of the greatest things of the economic boom we've experienced, the Trump bump per se, pre obviously coronavirus, is that millions of people got off of food stamps, and it just happened naturally. Like nobody had to kick them off; they just got jobs.
Just one small call out there, though. Yeah. They did change the food stamp process. There was made it more. I mean, there was cumbersome to apply.
They basically. I mean, you could get into an argument about what they required in order to qualify, but also even when they did exit polling on people that had it and people that didn't have it, a lot of them actually just plain old got jobs. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I mean, there wasn't an administrator sitting there saying, we've reviewed your materials, you are denied. Well, you're right. Okay, so I misspoke. I shouldn't have said it wasn't a denial as much as administrative change, but also you cannot deny the effects of a better economy. I mean, that's why Reagan had his famous phrase that the ultimate welfare is a job.
Yeah, right? And I'm so sorry for slowing down your point. You're making a substantial case there that, the reduction of the...
So it's like, I mean, obviously I know that there's people, and you hear the heartbreaking tweets about people that actually did have a dependence upon it. And then due to, not knowing that there was an administrative change or something like that, they were taken off. So I don't want to, lessen or minimize or diminish anybody's actual suffering that was dependent upon the program. But I look at that and I think, to me, just naturally, if all of a sudden people are having their own money to spend on things, they're just going to be doing a better job, and out of a lack of demand, the government size will shrink because there just won't be a demand for what they're offering. Like, why would you go to WIC? We famously had some problems here in LA with the food stamps and with WIC and everything, where because they were having a fight with some meat producer, and also there was a lot of people abusing food stamps where they were caught buying like champagne and wine on food stamp cards and buying like filet mignon steaks and stuff like that when they were saying that they weren't getting enough, but they're buying these expensive steaks, right? So famously, they took steaks off the shelf, thus eliminating the only protein that was offered. So they gave out all this peanut butter because like the doctors and the nutritionists said, well, there has to be a protein that's given away in WIC. And so, like, I had an employee that was showing up to work, like, giving away tons of peanut butter because he was allergic to peanut butter. He's like, anybody wants some peanut butter? I got like 15 things of peanut butter because our family has a food stamps recipient, right? And you look at that and you think that is just proof that giving somebody maybe that $500, they're going to be able to get a much better whole balanced meal off of their basic choices going to a free market store that offers the same to everybody than some centrally planned bureaucrat that all of a sudden realizes, oh my gosh, because of this deal and this beef I had with a beef producer, no pun intended, I actually just created a nutritional system that lacked protein and I compensated for it with peanut butter. You know what I'm saying? So
we see the same thing in like school lunches, for example. Like we can't even have an honest conversation on what people should eat overall. So why is the government the best at trying to feed people? I don't understand. You know?
Yeah. So what's the stop mean? I see the big stop sign behind you. Yeah.
Yeah. So the stop means see the other perspective, which is kind of, if you've probably noticed this, but your more conservative friends and then your more liberal friends, usually you'll agree about 85% of stuff that's in the middle. And that's kind of what I'm getting to. So,
okay. So you're kind of doing this ecumenical thing.
Ecumenical. That might be out of my vocabulary.
Oh, gosh, Cody. Hey, you know what ecumenical means? Is that like a weird Cardinism?
But I believe you just used the word. I don't know, Cardin. What does that word mean?
Ecumenical. How would you describe that? I'm going to look it up right now. Ecumenical. The ecumenical movement. Okay, sorry.
In the meantime, I have a short question.
Okay.
So one thing you didn't mention, Dan, that you were with the UBI Caucus. One second. I tried to post on the screen earlier and it showed the wrong thing. So I want to pull it up and show everybody that is running in that. Because I have a question. Have you been reached out to at all from the Andrew Yang campaign? Have you reached out to not the Andrew Yang campaign, sorry, the Humanity Forward movement? As one of the things they mentioned was supporting UBI candidates. I don't think they specified Republican or Democrat, just supporting UBI candidates. I'm just wondering if that's something you've any contact with them or not.
With Andrew Yang, no. With the Humanity Forward movement, so they were able to coordinate a survey, a candidate survey that went out like last week.
Oh, very cool.
And so my campaign we've been trying to get those guys moving, and I think I don't think they were ready to try to put this level of support out there because now it's, the numbers grow every day. I think it's like 30 candidates or something. So there's a whole vetting process. There's, how do you even coordinate who people should be attention to? Because not all the candidates are in winnable races. If you look at mine, technically on its head, if you look at me going up against an $8 million establishment candidate, it looks pretty crazy. But if you start thinking that inspiration is more important than money, then I think that we can start evaluating candidates a little bit differently.
Oh, very cool. So then I just thought that's interesting. The last few days it did happen. They reached out and put together a little thing for you guys. I'm glad to hear that because I just think I'm hoping I'm glad to see that you guys are doing over there in the UBI Caucus. But I think, we have so many candidates motivated to run in a short period of time on like a similar issue. I just really would hope to see some of these kind of like some kind of national organization helping people out in these different elections. Because, a lot of
I think it's the individual members of the Yang Gang that have been helping everybody out. So,
because I was going to say this.
Your platform, there's like Tom kind of has had a lot of us on.
Of course, yeah.
Zach and Matt has had a lot of us on.
Oh, yeah. I think Paget, a Paget show?
Paget did a 4-way live stream, I think, the other day. I wasn't invited, but
oh, dude,
she might be more on the.
She's selling out.
I say if we're gonna
her partisanship is ranked.
I guess. No, but UBI friends. But anyway, I thought that was really cool. Because I just think it's really interesting. It's one thing that's really unique and stands out. I mean, it's one thing that we've seen a lot of people motivated to run, yourself included in there. But just the idea that there's such a tie between. It's like the Andrew Yang campaign started online and got so many people thinking about this, and now kind of seeing the real world kind of seeds being planted. I think it's really cool. And then you mentioned just kind of help with the Yang Gang. Anything in particular that's been kind of like, Like, what's been the one thing you think, just having the little connection, people helping you in the UBI, where you kind of realized, like, all right, this is definitely a little bit of like a, I don't know, leg up, but this is unique. Like, I don't think every candidate gets this support. Anything like that happened?
Yeah, so I think the support is you're getting a lot of support from people that have thought about issues pretty deeply. Like, there's a whole group that's working on just giving candidates like a education platform, so they sit and discuss and they try to bring us into the conversation and then, develop things like that. But it's content creators, it's people with voices that help you get out there, and it doesn't take money. It's like what you guys are doing for me is essentially free, but like my competitor doesn't have a group of people that are passionate about a cause behind it.
No, it's very cool. No, I hate you.
He has to purchase that. And
so who's this Steve Daines chump you're running against, man? Who's this guy? I just looked you up on Montana 8 K-Pax, Missoula and Western Montana's premier TV station. And they got an article on you, man. And it says U.S. Senator Steve Daines now has some competition for the primary election come June 2nd. So, first, before I ask you about Steve Daines, I thoroughly believe Humanity Forward.
Wait, and ecumenical is?
Oh, ecumenical. I actually did look that up.
Somebody in chat has it too.
Basically, the ecumenical movement was birthed in the 40s and the 50s and finally kind of had its heyday in the 60s, where they were trying to bring all the Christian churches together. And instead of there being divisions, but like between Catholics and Protestants and stuff,
another word for diplomatic.
But ecumenical is more than just being diplomatic, because you can hate somebody and still be diplomatic with them. You can smile at them and stab them in the back, like they say in Goodfellas.
Yeah, I should have
but
asked.
ecumenical is actually like your heart's in it. You actually want to bring us together as brothers and sisters. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So anyway, that's what ecumenical means. Second question. Crap, now I already forgot the second question. So you might as well go on and tell me about this Steve Daines chump and how you're going to beat him, man.
So he's a candidate with a lot of negatives.
Okay.
So he doesn't usually put out original thoughts. He's been very much a yes man in Washington. And if you think about where we've been in the last 6 years, there's a lot of things to be frustrated with some of these GOP people out. So when we're going through it today, so the energy sector just took a huge tank. We're selling oil. It's negative value on oil. And so that energy sector was known for a long time that there was a problem. Energy spending or on exploration had kind of tailed off. They knew that there was a credit issue, and they were saying, even in this pre-COVID space, they're saying the economy's good, the economy's good, even though there's all these weak economic factors, right? Yeah. And so when we get to this place in energy space, because the energy sector started tanking even before we were on lockdown. So when we only get to those really volatile economic places because our politicians are purchased. We saw the same thing in 2005, 2006, when all of that deregulation of the lending industry had led to all the volatility. Yeah. So I hate to get super boring on this one, but there's a lot of things that these politicians are responsible at this point for. So it is the industry consolidations in meatpacking. It is, things like our fragile energy sector. It is our pharmaceutical companies. It is our healthcare costs. All of these people are in bed with the corporate voices, and it's creating all this fundamental weakness in our economy. So
sweet, dude. So it seems like you're really getting. It seems like you're really getting the local voice, and I really like that, where people that actually are attached to their community are doing it. I mean, Senate, that's a tough. Senator, that's tough. Like, usually you get somebody who is on city council, then became a mayor, you know what I'm saying? And then became a local legislature, like in the state legislature or the state Senate. And then they jump up to the House of Representatives. And if they serve decently there, their sixth office is Senate or something like that. You meet a lot of cats like that. Is there any time where you feel like your inexperience has actually hurt you? Because there's times where it helps you. Obviously, it's helping you because people feel like they identify a lot more with you. Are there any times where you've thought, oh, crap, like my inexperience really cost me on this one?
Oh, yeah. I've been beautifully naive on a couple of things. Yeah. Let's see. So when I first announced, and they did that K-Pax interview that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I said a lot of things in that interview, right?
Okay.
And she did a very good job of editing down what I said. And it's not like I said anything like,
she just made you look stupid.
Stuff that would have been super controversial because I was just a passionate person at that point, and if she would have taken any of those sound bites in the wrong way, I think it could have hurt some people. So, I guess realizing that I have a responsibility with what I say and that it can actually, affect different industries. It could affect different people. That was one. Also, I went to Las Vegas after that interview because I had managed a chocolate plant there in for Mars. Yeah. And I was like, well, I'm going to call the local newspaper or the local reporters up, and I'm going to walk them through the plant, tell them what I did, and it'll be this huge thing.
Yeah.
And so I show up, and Mars is like the largest private organization in the country. And I was thinking, I'll just show up and bring the camera crews and it'll be fine. And then I had to really start thinking about, why is it that they would not be interested? And it's like, well, they've got this huge global supply chain, and it would matter if they start getting into politics. So, I mean, that's just my beautifully naive sort of personality. So,
okay, that's cool though. That's cool, man. So, my last question is, I remember we were talking with Heidi about getting on the ballot. It was really expensive process. Here in California, it cost you $3,000, and that's if you just want an English only, explanation. It's $800 every other language, and depending on where you live, you're probably gonna have to translate it into at least Spanish, if not Korean, Thai. There's a million sub communities that are very necessary voting blocks if you want to have success in some of these areas. So she was talking about the interesting burden that just the expense of starting to run was. What was did you just decide one day I want to just run for office, and you're just I don't know, through the down payment of your house down, or did you self-fund, or were you just able to really get a bunch of supporters really, really quick? How did you get that first out the gates candidacy going? You know what I'm saying? How was it birthed?
Yeah, so I'm a father of 4, and that's kind of why I jumped into this race. Okay. So after, Yang suspending was a big deal, but the impeachment was a bigger deal for me, and seeing that none of the Republican voices were actually willing to do a voice of dissent. And I had actually written Steve Daines during the process, and that's when I got the form letter that had a bunch of executive talking points. And so I believe in a couple of fundamental things in our, just about our democracy. So separation of powers is huge for me, all this other stuff. So I don't think that any of our incumbent Republicans should have went unchallenged in their primaries. So I thought it was a responsibility that somebody had to do it. So I had sold 10 acres that I had purchased when I had moved up here. And I still had some residual funds left in the bank. And I talked to my wife, and I was like, all right, can we do this? It was a $1,700 entry. And then it cost me probably my last $10,000 in my bank account to get this.
Dude, I love it. So you literally sold the proverbial farm. Now we gotta vote for you. If you're listening in your Montana, you have to do it. That Steve Daines chump isn't freaking selling the farm, man.
Yeah,
this guy's selling the farm.
It would be the equivalent of Steve Daines self-funding to about the tune of $22 million. So my account's different, but yeah.
All right, dude. All right, I liked it. That's what I wanted to hear. That's what I want to hear. I was just talking to my buddy right now. He said, oh, well, I'm an artist. And he was talking about, he's an illustrator, right? And I believe illustration is art. Okay, everybody can just chill out. But it was really funny. I told him, I said, dude, man, before you use, I'm okay with using the title illustrator, but before you use the word artist, man, I want you in a corner talking to voices that aren't there. I see both of the ears on your head, man. You ain't no artist. You know what I'm saying? Until you're mixing your blood with the paint that goes on the canvas, you're not an artist, man. You're just an illustrator. And so I was like, you're not a politician. You're not a grassroots politician. everybody uses that term grassroots. Nancy Pelosi this week used the term for her grassroots campaign. I'm like, shut up. You raise like $100 million a year. You're the opposite of grassroots, girlfriend. You're a $350,000 a day fundraiser. You ain't no grassroots campaign, all right? So everybody uses the term grassroots. I don't want to give you the title of grassroots until you're freaking selling the farm, and you did it, baby. So that is awesome. Cody,
so maybe you should create the rules that we live by in the future. You're not grassroots. You can't use this title unless you do this.
Yeah, exactly. So Cody, any last questions before we go?
Nothing super specific. Just, of course, let us know where people can find you, where they find you on the internet. And I guess that's my last question right there, too, is we touched on it before, but where do you go online if you want to reach people in Montana on the internet? Where do you go?
You have to go to Facebook.
Okay, that's what I figured. That's we were talking.
And
before.
I'm terrible at Facebook, and that's a problem. It's a handicap.
It's funny. At least you both know that's where they are. No, you got to improve. So that's like what's GI Joe say? It's like 90% of the battle, or half the battle, one or the other. Either way, and then also just where we can find you on social media, websites, anything like that. Let them know, and I'll have them linked in the description as well.
Yeah. So I'm my website is danformontana.com. My Twitter handle is @DanForMontana. Facebook, I think, is Daniel Larson for Montana. So that's the primary ways to get a hold of me. I think I have my number posted in several spots, so people can usually just call me up.
Oh, very cool.
If they have any questions. So.
Dude, this is awesome. I'm totally digging it. This is like great.
Oh, also I have a YouTube channel as well. So.
Rock on. You're going to have to add some clips from this.
We're gonna have to add
you got to add the clip about selling the farm.
Oh, you guys
That's
are
what
on
I wanna
it. Yeah,
see.
you're featured tomorrow. So.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, baby. That's what I'm talking about. So anyway, his name is Daniel Larson, and he's running for Montana's what district? Or what Senate?
U.S. Senate. U.S. Senate.
So you'd be the junior senator, because would you be kicking out the senior senator?
I would be the junior.
You would be the junior, but would you be kicking out the senior? Would you be
no,
against the senior?
Our other senators got seniority over this guy.
Okay, cool. So he's hoping to be the junior senator, and he's a pro UBI guy, so you got to support him if you're Montana. This is Problem Solver Politics. We'll see you guys in the next video.